name is Robert Rogers, and I will be serving as moderator for this event. I want to welcome everyone to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum, and this is for candidates and issues running for Mayor, City Council, and Assembly District 15. I also should mention our wonderful co-sponsors tonight, along with the League of Women Voters, the Neighborhood Councils, Santa Fe Neighborhood Council, Coronado Neighborhood Council, Iron Triangle Neighborhood Council, Shields Reed Neighborhood Council, the Parchester Village Neighborhood Council, and Richmond Village Metro Square. Richmore Village, I apologize. Richmore Village, give it up for them. Thank you. I also would like to mention the council presidents. I'm going to list a few names. Let's please applaud at the end. Vernon Whitmore, Joe Fisher, Doris Mason, Marina Brown, Garetha Johnson, and Dina Love. Please give it up for them. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, which means we do not support candidates or political parties. We can, however, take positions on issues when possible and when based on league studies. It is league policy to ask that no one display campaign buttons, sign, or literature within this room. The table in the hall in the back of the room contains materials for anyone to take with them. Please look at your programs if you have one. It should include the names of candidates, the issues of the election, the rules for asking questions, and so forth. Our event tonight will begin with the mayor's candidates. We will then go to the council candidates and then the assembly district. During this mayor candidate forum, we have sitting mayor Tom Butt and challenger Melvin Willis. We're going to start with 3 minutes introductions for each candidate. Then we'll have a series of follow-up questions, including questions from the audience if you'd like to bring them up to Joan Carpenter. She'll be able to have them for us. And 1 minute closing. I also would be remiss if I did not thank very much Naomi Williams and B. Roberson, as well as Joan Carpenter. These are League of Women Voters officers who will be helping moderate and helping facilitate this event. Thank you. So again, that's 3 minute intros, 2 minute answers of the questions, and a 1 minute closing statement. Let's begin with the 3 minute introduction, and we'll start with Challenger Willis.
Timeout, so you can tell where you are in time. Naomi will hold up the green paper for 1 minute, the yellow paper for 30 seconds, and the red one is you're up.
That's very helpful. Thank you, B and Naomi. Councilmember Willis, please begin.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out today, and to the League of Women Voters for giving me this space, and all the neighborhood councils that have sponsored this event as well. My name is Melvin Willis. I grew up here in the city of Richmond, and I'm a candidate that's running that doesn't take any corporate donations. I grew up in this city, and after graduating out of El Cerrito High School, a few years later, I ended up becoming an organizer with a group called Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment. Now, the thing about this organization is it actually gave me an opportunity to do what people were afraid to do just on a daily basis, which is actually go out into your neighborhood in Richmond and talk to your neighbors. My first day when I started out, I started door knocking in North Richmond. Now, at this time, North Richmond still had that reputation where people were making jokes about if you were to send somebody there up the block, they might not make it out. But when I started knocking on doors, I discovered community members that had the same concerns that I had. We were concerned about how our city looked, we were concerned about safety, and we were concerned about just being able to make it day in and day out. And what we were organizing around was the foreclosure crisis and how blighted properties that were abandoned by banks or owners that didn't give them a chance, that didn't maintain them, became a magnet for squatters, for illegal dumping, and any other illicit activities. And that organizing effort led to us having a 250 person meeting at Nevin Community Center, which led to us passing a vacant property registration ordinance. So that way, once a property goes vacant, owners have to register it with the city so we keep track of it and make sure that it doesn't become a blight on the community. Since I've been an organizer for the past 7 years, I've organized homeowners to fight for principal reductions along preventing foreclosures to keep families in their homes. And one of the recent things that I've been a part of is passing rent control and just cause for eviction to add tenants more protections to make sure they're not getting 30% or double increases on the rent or kicked out for no reason, which actually led to the senior complex at Heritage being able to get a rent reduction when they were looking at a 12% rent increase at first. Because of the rent program and the ordinance that we passed, we were able to work with those tenants, and they were thinking they were going to be homeless for the 4th of July, and now they're still living there and enjoying being Richmond residents still. I do all this because I care about helping people. I care about working together to figure out what are the issues and concerns and how are we coming together to build our collective power to make a difference and make sure people can feel safe and secure in this community so we can have a chance to thrive. I look forward to all the questions, and thank you for giving me this space.
Mayor Butt, please.
Nice to be back here. My architecture firm designed this building, which was built about 5 years ago. So there's always more to do, but by every metric, Richmond is better off than it was 4 years ago, and dramatically better off than it was 10 years ago. Crime is down, employment is up. Today we have the lowest unemployment rate in Richmond history. The Richmond Promise Program has awarded over 1,000 scholarships. Richmonders are saving millions on electricity through MCE while fighting global warming. Budgets are balanced. The street repair budget is doubled. The ferry is only a few months off. We saved the Richmond Post Office. We stood up to Trump on immigration, climate change, and environment. Even my opponent agrees. In his candidate statement, he states Richmond is safer, healthier, and more prosperous. As we transition to a new city manager, experienced leadership is critical. Before being elected mayor, I served 19 years on the Richmond City Council through 5 tough elections. My opponent has served only 19 months, winning a single election. He voted against hiring our new city manager. 4 years ago, I stood up to Chevron and was elected mayor with 51% of the vote, despite $3 million they poured into the campaign against me. People know that I am truly the independent candidate representing all of Richmond. My opponent, however, is part of the Richmond Progressive Alliance and part of a slate with a limited platform that leaves many Richmonders out. Richmond is a large and diverse community, but is united on several things. Crime and safety are at the top of the list for most people. I support a robust police department that excels in community policing, as well as programs like Ceasefire, the Office of Neighborhood Safety. I want to provide technology to help police do their job. My opponent is suspicious of police and voted to take some of these tools away. Young people are our future, and we need to partner with our schools to give them the best possible education. That's why I negotiated the $35 million Richmond Promise program. The Richmond Progressive Alliance voted against it. Next to crime, people care most about the condition of our streets, medians, sidewalks. Potholes and weeds are frequent complaints. We need to build up our tax base with new economic development so we can help pay for these services. Finally, we need to provide more housing for people of all income levels. My opponent believes we should only build affordable housing, forgetting that market rate housing provides the necessary subsidies for affordable housing. My opponent's political allies have opposed several housing projects, including even affordable housing. I have a comprehensive housing strategy. It's on the internet. You can go read it. It addresses every aspect of homelessness and housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Butt and Councilman Willis. I also want to remind the audience this is a very participatory forum, and you are all welcome to ask your own questions. Linda Whitmore is walking around. She has index cards, and you are able to fill them out if you wish. So let's begin with our first question. As you both understand, the city's budget is under constant stress. Folks are concerned about the level of services across a range of services in the city. Given another 4 years, or a new 4 years, if you will, what will you do to, one, prioritize spending in the city budget, and two, to increase revenues to the city to better provide services to residents? Let's begin with Councilmember Willis.
All right, thank you for the question. One of the things that I've also heard, just to make a note, like the city's barely just coming out of a deficit, because we've been in a deficit ever since that 2012 refinery fire happened, and we didn't get as much property tax revenue from the Chevron refinery as we once did. So I'm just happy we've been able to have a budget to where we haven't been looking at layoffs recently. One of the exciting things that I did just find out about a few weeks ago is that the reform of Prop 13 is going to be on the ballot on 2020, and if that passes to where homeowners can still maintain their property tax write-offs and getting major industrial corporations to pay their fair share in property taxes, that means $10 billion extra in California revenue, and the Bay Area is looking to at least get $3 billion of that. But as for right now, to prioritize youth programs and services, because once again, I door knock in the community, and a lot of folks I talk to have attributed the crime and violence to the fact that there are not enough youth services. We on the City Council just did a ballot initiative called Measure Eggs to tax luxury properties up to $1 million. So whenever there is a transfer of property or a sale, the city's going to get revenue. And because we just passed a Richmond Kids First initiative that will trigger about 3% of our city's general fund to go into youth programs and services, if we're able to pass Measure H, that's going to be extra revenue to go into youth programs and services too. And it's also going to have to be looking at different state grants and county grants that we need to align Richmond with in order to get new revenue. One of the things is going to be working with the county to get more revenue and to deal with the homeless issue and figuring out the different ways we can work with our county to line us up with grants that can help us out with funding for homelessness, which the Homeless Task Force that the mayor voted against, by the way, is working on currently. So thank you so much. And we could think about other creative ideas right now, but those are the main things that have been lined up so far that I've been working on.
Thank you, Councilmember Willis. Mayor Butt, same question.
Well, the city has actually had a structurally balanced budget the last 3 years, and that's really good news. But you know, we're always sort of on the precipice, and the biggest threat we have right now is the future of unfunded pension and OPEB liabilities. Without some kind of action, they will be as much as 40 or 50% of our budget in the next 5 years. So we've got to figure this out. Hopefully we'll get some help from the state. Hopefully our public employee unions will sit down with us and we'll work together to get to work our way through this. As far as additional revenue goes, the best place to look for it is economic development. Most of our taxes and the opportunity for tax increases comes from property taxes and from retail sales taxes. And if we grow our economy, we will also grow our revenue sources. I put a measure on the ballot, Measure T, that is a tax on unused vacant property. And if it passes, it'll raise about a little over $5 million to pay for homeless services, and also to expand the city's services in the area of blight reduction and code enforcement. So we'll be looking for that. You know, my opponent talked about Measure H. You know, I support it, but it's not going to put any new revenue into traditional city services. All that money is going to have to go for kids first, and it's all new money. So it's not going to get your streets paved, and it's not going to put more police on the street or do anything that addresses those additional services. So again, you know, the hardest thing I work on all the time is economic development.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Butt. I also want to announce again for folks who have come in late that we do have a Spanish translator in the back. She's raising her hand. Anyone who, how do we say this? Necesito hablar español in the back. Please, she's there to help. Thank you. Next question, and we'll begin this time with you, Mayor Butt. Trash and blight and dumping remain a consistent concern in the community. The residents continue to be dissatisfied with city services in terms of keeping the streets clean, keeping trash off the streets. How would you assess the situation now, and what can we do differently?
Well, I've lived in Richmond now for 45 years, and during that time the population has increased by 50%. And I can tell you that during the time I've lived here, if you think it's bad now, you should have seen it 40 years ago. So Richmond is much cleaner, much healthier than it was back in the day, at least the day that I came to Richmond. But it's still a huge problem. And what's happened because of the budget cuts we've had to make across the board, the number of people we have working code enforcement who both enforce dumping ordinances and they also clean up the messes, that number of people has been reduced. And that's why it's always a challenge. Again, that's one of the reasons I put Measure T on the ballot. Measure T is aimed at both encouraging people to take care of their lots and to assess a tax and a penalty if they have unused vacant lots. You know, these lots are the main attraction for dumpers around the city. So Measure T would increase by over $1 million the amount of money that's available to our code enforcement personnel, and hopefully they could do a better job. You know, finally, a lot of this is up to all of you guys. People dump all over Richmond. And, you know, if you see a problem, you need to report it, you need to call the cops, you need to call people out for doing this. It's kind of a cultural thing. It's like gunfire on New Year's Eve, and it's like fireworks on the 4th of July. They're all against the law, but everybody does it because that's what we do in Richmond. And so I think peer pressure from all of you, talking to your neighbors and watching what's going on, could have a tremendous impact.
Thank you, Mayor Butt. Councilman Willis.
Yeah, for as long as I can remember, dumping has constantly been an issue. I have seen it get improved because, as I began in my opening statement, we did pass the vacant property registration ordinance. So if you see like a dilapidated property or a abandoned property that looks blighted, it's important that everybody takes it upon themselves to call code enforcement and let them know and report it so they can have it on record and go to clean it up. And it's also going to be important to work with code enforcement department to see what are the issues, what are the barriers, and what are some of the things that we could do not only as council members but as citizens to address it. I've noticed different community cleanups that have been happening in North Richmond off of 23rd Street that have gotten people more invested about keeping the area cleaned up by actually getting folks out into the streets and making it a thing, just like saying, hey, we're actually cleaning up our community. And also I serve on the Recycle More board where they have scheduled trash days to where we could get dumpsters out in certain parts of the community and allow people to come out and dump some of the heavier things, because a lot of folks have complained about how expensive it is just to take their trash and go dump it at the dumps. And at the same time, as we're seeking new revenue and talking about a balanced budget. Every time we come across our budget, seeing like where's our extra revenue and how can we fund our code enforcement services so they can take care of the blight that's happening in our community. So it's going to be a multi-pronged thing to deal with it, but as long as we're reporting it, getting out into the streets and showing investments, not just community members, but city officials ourselves, and working with our Recycle More board to get dump days out there so people can get rid of some of the more bulkier items off of their back so it's not in our community, we can start to see improvements, but it will take a lot of work, but it definitely isn't an impossible situation.
Thank you, Councilmember Willis. All of the issues that we're discussing here tonight require folks working together. In a democracy like the one we have here in the city with folks being elected to serve on a council, the mayor's seat itself only acts as one vote on the council in many situations. So given that we have to work together, talk about, if you would, your record for building consensus and how important it is to work in a cooperative manner with your colleagues on the council. We'll begin with Councilmember Willis.
Yeah, there's no secret that in Richmond politics, definitely not everybody has gotten along on that dais, but whenever we're stepping up on that dais, it's not about how we personally feel, it's about being that representative for the city of Richmond. And it probably is no secret that the mayor and myself, especially around rent control, we definitely don't see eye to eye on a lot of political issues, but there are more political issues than what we care about, and there are more concerns in the community that we don't know about that we do need to work collaboratively on and come up with creative ideas. So I'm always open to being cordial and working together as long as it's benefiting the citizens in the city of Richmond, because it's not about me at that moment. Every time I sit there, I'm trying to hold myself accountable to make sure that I'm making the right decisions on behalf of all of y'all, because this isn't about me and it isn't about anybody else sitting on that board. It's about passing good legislation, good policy, and being accountable to the community so that we can build trust within our city government and make sure that the voices of our neighborhoods are being heard every time we step up to a city council meeting and every time we show up to a community event. So in terms of personal differences, that doesn't matter when we're sitting up there. My focus is on what are the issues, what are the potential solutions, and what ideas can we come up with to address those issues so we can all be able to feel like we accomplished something.
Thank you, Councilman Willis. Mayor Butt.
Well, you know, on any given city council agenda, there are, typically 30, 40 items on there. And for the most, let's say there's 40 items on there. We probably have a unanimous vote on 39 of them. And, we get the city's work done. But, there's always some sticking point there where we have an issue and we disagree. And, that's what happens in a democracy. It's not a bad thing. I will say that I think our city council has gotten a lot more productive. When I became mayor, we had just gone through about at least 4 years, 6 years of what I call the Corky Bouze era. When Corky made it a habit to interrupt constantly everybody on the city council, every meeting, and he had a bunch of folks out there in the audience that helped him do it. And it was probably the worst 4 years I've ever spent on the city council. But miraculously, 4 years ago, Corky went away, all those other folks went away. We still have Mark Wasberg, but if we're lucky, we get to throw him out early and get on with our business. And so, we get the city's business done. And there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with people, as I said before. That's the way democracy works. Just be glad, I think, that we don't all believe in the same thing and rubber stamp everything that comes before the city council. You get some good discussion, both from the public and among council members. And at the end of the day, we get the job done. Some of us are happy, some of us are not so happy, but we chalk it up and we move on to the next thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Butt. This is a question that we've received from the audience. Rent control was a very divisive issue in this city, and then it became settled law, and now it's a department, and it's been rolled out, and it has had an effect in the community. How would you assess the effectiveness of this policy, and should it continue? We'll begin with Mayor Butt.
Well, I don't think it's any secret that I oppose rent control, and I still do, and I oppose the repeal of Costa-Hawkins. I will concede a couple of things. One of them is that we do have a housing crisis in the city of Richmond. I recognize that about 40 to 60% of the people in Richmond are paying more than 30% of their income for housing, and that's at all income levels, and that's a huge problem. And I will concede that there are some bad landlords out there, and that there are a few people who may have benefited from, from rent control. However, the big picture is that we've created a multi-million-dollar bureaucracy that's sucking a lot of time and revenue out of Richmond, and I don't think there's any evidence that that overall that it's really accomplished anything. We haven't seen any metrics, about how many people have avoided foreclosure because of it, how many people have avoided an illegal rent increase because of it. We just don't have that. All I get are the stories from people who, who want to move back into their condominium, and it's going to cost them $15,000 to move a tenant out. And so I get all those stories. Maybe my opponent gets different stories, but that's what I get. Now, the repeal of Costa-Hawkins, I think, would be disastrous for Richmond because it automatically takes effect. And if Costa-Hawkins passes, every rental unit in Richmond automatically comes under Costa-Hawkins. I don't think you'll ever see another rental project built in Richmond if Costa-Hawkins passes. And you think we have a housing crisis now, just wait till then.
Thank you, Mayor Butt. Councilman Willis.
All right, thank you. So being a community organizer out there going out door knocking, I've seen people get anywhere between $50 increases, which is okay, but also the $600 increases sometimes double the original rent in 1 year. And that was back in 2015 when I was out there door knocking, identifying tenants. Not only were they getting rent increases, they were being told that they needed to maintain the property, which in a lot of cases that's not the tenant's responsibility, and they were afraid to speak up because they thought they would get kicked out for no reason. Passing rent control was a ballot initiative that took us gathering signatures, and it took people getting out to vote with 65% of the vote. Repealing Costa-Hawkins would expand our rent control ordinance, but it doesn't stop landlords from going up on rent. Our California state constitution guarantees a fair return on rent. You can go up on rent 100% of consumer price index, and our rent program has a petitioning process for if you need a reason to go up on rent more than the allowable limit. There's a process for that at the rent board, just making it not have to be a decision that just comes down from the landlord onto the tenant who might not be able to afford that. I've seen people in Richmond get $1,000 rent increases in 1 year. I've seen people pay $1,500 a month for a single family home, and then it doubled because out of nowhere their landlord had a problem with them, and they were paying $3,000 a month, and now they're residents in Sacramento. And there's been this thing saying that rent control prevents development. When we got LA and San Francisco, they've had rent control longer than anybody, and they've been building more housing than jurisdictions that don't have rent control. On top of that, Berkeley and Oakland has been seeing a boom of development. They also are cities that have rent control. So wherever this is coming from, I feel is developers crying wolf because they don't want to be regulated. But my main issue is making sure that people are secure in this community and being able to have more revenue in their pockets to put in our local economy.
Thank you, Councilmember Willis. Let's imagine that it's day one in your new administration, either of you. What's your number one priority when you're sworn in and you sit in that mayor's chair or you get in that mayor's office? What's your number one priority on day one? Councilmember Willis, please.
One of the things I want to do day one is be able to use the ability to have direct staff to look into things like fair scheduling and fair work week for the city of Richmond, which is something that we have the ability to do now, but there is a lot of research that needs to go into it. And fair work week is basically saying that if you're working in Richmond, you have the right to get a schedule within 2 weeks, not get any last minute calls saying that you have to come in immediately or you might lose your job. It's offering more protections for working people. Also making sure that we are appointing people to all of our commissions and committees that have to go through the mayor's office, because I know there was an issue with 1 or 2 of our committees where appointments weren't being made, so making sure that that process is open. And at the same time using the mayor's staff to look into things like we just heard about 2400 Nevin, where they had a lot of issues happening over there, and our city staff told us at several meetings that they were aware of those issues and they were handling it. But we just got a bunch of folks came in a couple weeks ago saying that these issues are still present and nothing's being done. So being able to use the resources that the mayor's office has to look at those issues and work with the various departments and staff to figure out creative solutions so people in our community don't have to suffer like that, to make sure that their ears, their voices are being heard through that city hall, so we're not just turning a blind eye to it or pretending like nothing's happening. One of the things about being on city council is you're very hands-on and you have everything goes through you. You don't really have that many opportunities to send people out to bring additional information to you unless you have volunteers on hand. So being able to do that, and also I just want to open up the mayor's office to where we could have neighborhood groups work within the office of the mayor so we could come up with creative solutions that could go through city council and turn it into actual real policy that's led by the public.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Willis. Mayor Butt.
Well, I can tell you that my #1 priority has not changed, and I believe that it's the priority that most of the community shares, and that is crime and public safety. The complaints I get, now maybe my opponent over here gets a lot of calls about rent and tenants' rights and things like that. And that's good. I'm glad people have found somebody they have confidence to talk to about these things. But the complaints I get are different. I get complaints from Hilltop Fairmead about people doing donuts in their street and speeding. I get complaints in the Iron Triangle about gunfire. I get complaints Monterey Pines about homicides. I get complaints from people about in Point Richmond about having their car broken into, getting all their tools stolen out of their pickup. That's what I get day in, day out. And what do people ask for? They all ask, I want more police patrols in my neighborhood. The 23rd Street Merchants Association showed up at our council meeting last week, about a dozen of them. What did they ask for? They asked for more police patrols to try to stop the prostitution and stop the crime on 23rd Street. So my highest priority, again, is crime and public safety. I want to keep driving that down to the point where people in this city feel safe and they don't have to complain about those things anymore. People ask me sometimes if you could have one wish as mayor and have it granted, what would it be? That wish would be 0 homicides. I wish that I could end some year and say, you know what? In Richmond, we reached 0 homicides. We didn't have any homicides this year. Right now, we're up to about 14, which is historically is low. It's about tied with our record, but it's too high.
Thank you, Mayor Butt. And I'll remind the audience, we are getting close to wrapping up, and we will transition to the city council portion of our forum tonight. We'll do one more question and then have time for closing statements. The next question is, retaining revenues in the city is vital to support all these services that we're discussing tonight. And it's getting more challenging for cities with different shopping habits by residents, more online retailers and so forth. A lot of this makes it difficult to capture tax revenues. What will you do to ensure that the city is doing all it can to retain revenues, capture sales taxes, and grow our city budget to provide services. Let's start with Mayor Butt.
Well, I think I've already talked about trying to build up economic development and increase property values and increase retail sales taxes. And when I first became mayor, somebody asked me, what kind of mayor you're going to be, and I thought about a lot of things. And I said, you know what, I'm going to be the business mayor. The last mayor did not like business. I don't think my opponent likes business. But business is critical to produce those taxes that you need to provide the services people want. I've held a mayor's business roundtable every quarter since I was elected to bring together successful new businesses in Richmond to share with us why they came to Richmond, what they like about Richmond, how the city's treating them, and what kind of things we could do in the city of Richmond to attract more businesses. I happen to be a small business person myself. I'm the only person on the city council who's ever run a business. I'm the only person in city council who's ever had to make a payroll. I understand business. I understand how important it is. I understand what the needs of business are, and I understand what it takes to encourage businesses to locate in Richmond, to start in Richmond, and to grow in Richmond. And I think that's really the key to it. Richmond, unfortunately, has the next to lowest median family income of any city in the 101 city Bay Area. And so we have a problem. We have a problem raising the kind of income that people in other cities are used to seeing and the services they are interested in. So we got to be creative. We've got to look for other sources of income, and that income is going to come. It's going to come from successful businesses that locate in Richmond, grow in Richmond, and are successful in Richmond.
Thank you, Mayor Butt. Vice Mayor Willis.
One story I'll share, this may not be necessarily about housing, but when we did pass rent control in 2016, we got a story that came to my office where somebody pulled their kid out of a performing arts class because they got an increase on rent, and it was like either send them to that class or not pay the increase, so they pulled them out. But because we were able to pass rent control and there was a rollback, their kid is now going back to that performing arts class because they had more money in their pocket. That's why I also believe in repealing Costa-Hawkins to strengthen tenant protections, because the more money being paid into housing, the less that's being paid into our local economy. And if you actually give people the ability to have more money in their pocket to spend in the economy, we will thrive better. And one of the other things that I did was also lead the efforts to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which is going to be $15 by 2019, which in addition is going to give people more money in their pocket to spend into the local economy. And in terms of the business part, I've had friends that wanted to open up businesses that are from Richmond and they wanted to invest in Richmond, but they said that they were having trouble going through the planning department, and it actually wasn't the first time that I heard that. Being able to be in the mayor's office and have the resources of the mayor to actually work with our planning department and see what issues people are facing in terms of trying to open up a business here and what can we do to fix it and make it more easier and user-friendly can help increase our economic development part if we already got people interested. And on top of that, we got groups that are working, staff that are working within the city, and groups outside of the city as well that are focused on small business development and increasing our local economy. So making sure that I'm closely working with them to get businesses out there promoted and show up to make sure that people know about these businesses so they can actually come out and invest their money into it. So it's going to take a multi-pronged approach again, but all it takes is willpower and the work to get it done.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Before we transition into closing statements, I want to again thank everyone in the audience, as well as the League of Women Voters, our great facilitators, Joan Carpenter, B. Roberson, and Naomi Williams, as well as Linda Whitmore running around getting the questions. Thanks, everybody, for a great debate so far. And with that, before we go into the closing statements, I want to remind council members we'll be going into that portion of tonight's program. And with that, let's begin with Vice Mayor Willis. Your closing statement, 1 minute, please.
Well, thank you all again for giving me a chance to address you today. My name is Melvin Willis once again, and I am running as a candidate that doesn't take any corporate donations, and I have been an organizer for 7 years. In that time, rent control, just cause for eviction, helping increase the minimum wage twice, being a part of banning the box on job applications to give those who from reentry a chance without being discriminated against for their past, working on a county effort to pass a program called Contra Costa Care so those who are undocumented can have access to preventative health care regardless of immigration status, and being a part of the Racial Justice Coalition to get the county to pay back money that they illegally took from youth that were caught in the criminal justice system and end that practice altogether. My expertise is working with people, identifying issues and bringing people together around those issues so we can come up with creative solutions. This is something that's important to me because I don't like walking by and seeing other people suffer when there's something we could do about it, and being able to have the political willpower and public officials involved in the community is what I want to bring. So vote for me November 6th. November 7th is my mom's birthday.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Willis. Mayor Butt.
Okay, I'll start with a question. Why would you want to try out a new mayor, turning the city's leadership over to the least experienced member of the city council now? In Richmond, we always have our work cut out for us, but we're really on a roll. Things will keep getting better if we don't do something crazy. With the new city manager coming in, this is not the time to change horses. We need institutional memory and stability while at the same time creating an even better future. In my next term, I'll be focusing on crime and safety, infrastructure maintenance, dumping, blight, housing and homelessness, economic development, jobs, the environment, and climate change, all with an emphasis on health, fairness, inclusion, and equity. And we can't do this alone. We need all of you to pitch in and be part of creating a Richmond that is better for all and we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Butt. Thank you, Vice Mayor Willis. And with that, let's get one more round of applause for League of Women Voters and for both candidates. Thank you. And City Council hopefuls, please make your way up to the podium.